What's up, everyone? Aaron Nagler here, PackersNews.com, late in the day on Wednesday. The owners' meetings, the NFL annual meetings are wrapping up. Our Michael Cohen and Pete Doherty are on their way, in the air, on their way back from Orlando. I'm here in New York City to take your questions and talk to you about the Green Bay Packers. See what's on your minds when it comes to the green and gold. The Packers president and CEO, Mark Murphy, earlier today talking about some of the rule changes that have been implemented, that are going to be implemented, and possibly implemented down the line. Murphy indicating that if significant changes aren't made to the kickoff, that the competition committee will recommend doing away with the kickoff play. So that's interesting. That, coupled with the new rules around the lowering of helmets when tackling and approaching tacklers, could bring some significant fundamental changes to the NFL in the near future. But as far as the team goes, not a whole lot of news. Brian Gutekunst saying earlier today that free agency isn't over. It's an ongoing process. There are still guys they have their eyes on. Guys could still come free, either cap casualties or they could be released after the draft when teams fill various roster spots. So obviously something to keep an eye on. I don't think anything is imminent, but definitely something to look for further down the road. In the meantime, I see many of you have jumped in here. Hello to all. Thank you for jumping on, and so many questions right away. I like it. Do the players lift weights during the season? Maybe too much, maybe injured. That means why they're having all the injuries. They do lift weights throughout the season and the off season. I tend to think it's much more about what they're doing in the off season and how they're training. Because, once they're in the kind of under the purview of the training staff and the nutrition group, they're pretty regimented. But when they're away from the facility, obviously all the guys are training. But I tend to think some of that may be, every guy's different. Everybody knows their body better than any trainer ever could. But, I've heard plenty of NFL people, players, and coaches talk about how some guys may be training the wrong way, not in a way that is conducive to the playing football on the field, but rather much more track and field, much more bodybuilding, so to speak. So I think there's something to that, but I think a lot of it is much more because of how much time these guys have away from the facility now, comparative to how it used to be when they were pretty much, it was much more of a 365 type proposition. Whereas now, after the new CBA in 2011, players have a lot more free time and a lot more time to do things as they see fit. Is there any news on Aaron Rodgers signing a long-term contract? Nope, nothing yet. Gutekunst was asked about it a couple days ago. Slight progress, small progress, but it's a very complex structure. It's going to be a very complex deal. I do not doubt for a second that Russ Ball is going to have to earn his money on this one. And look, David Dunn, Aaron Rodgers' agent, and Rodgers himself, they have very little reason to hurry on this thing. He's still under contract for 2 more years. Now, obviously they would like to get him in the upper echelon when it comes to the NFL pay scale. There's no doubt about that. But they really have no impetus to get this deal done anytime soon. So the Packers will undoubtedly try to make it worth their while to do so, but I still think it's going to be a pretty drawn-out process, and I would suspect it goes throughout the summer. C.J. Anderson and Randall Cobb. I'm not sure of the correlation there. Go Packers from Brazil. Well, hello, Karina. Thanks for joining us. Josh, so Goot will build this roster. He knows how to evaluate talent. Andrew, I tend to agree. You think Ward from Ohio State will be there at 14? No, Orlando, I do not. I think he'll most likely be the first corner off the board. I don't see him lasting to 14. But, heck, this is why we watch the draft, it's so heavily consumed. It's the one, event in the NFL calendar that is so wildly unpredictable. I mean, the games themselves are hard enough to predict, but you look at the draft every year, every single year, especially on the first night, on round 1, every year people come in and say, well, this will never happen, that will never happen, and every year something crazy happens that nobody expected. So we'll see. I would tend to doubt it, but you never know. What would it take to get Patrick Peterson? That's a good question. I would say probably a third-round pick, maybe a second-round pick, when you consider that Jimmy Garoppolo just went for a second. Maybe a third and a fourth. I don't know. I can't imagine that Arizona's truly that interested in trading him, but you never know. I think you'd have to kind of bowl them over with an offer, though. What am I supposed to do with my Jordy jersey? Single tier. I was actually just on UK Packers podcast, and we talked about how, you buy a jersey, man, that's the kiss of death. That's the law of NFL fandom right there. My old partner at Cheesehead TV, Corey Banke, he famously, I think it was like 3 years in a row, bought a brand new spanking jersey, and every single year, that dude was gone the next season. Whether it was like Mike McKenzie, what was it? 1 year it was AJ Hawk, I don't remember, but it was just funny. Like, he kept buying jerseys, and the guys kept leaving. That's the way it works, man. Do the Packers go safety in the first round? I tend to doubt it. What's funny is I've noticed online, it really seems that people think safety is a big need for the Packers. And I'm not suggesting they are going to draft strictly on need, but, unless maybe if Derwin James lasts and, they want to use him in the slot, they talk to him about, his role in the slot in their defense, if he ended up being there, maybe, but I don't think safety is as big a need as many people think it is on the outside. I think they really like what they got in Josh Jones. I think they expect Kentrell Bryce to come back healthy and make a contribution and compete for a starting job. And, if a talent falls to them like James, then I certainly think they'll consider it. But I think cornerback is much more likely, as is edge rusher. Wide receiver a bigger need than cornerback? I don't see that, Corey. And I think maybe you're responding to somebody else in the comments, but, I understand Jordy leaving. A lot of production goes out the door, but you have to think a lot of that will be picked up by Jimmy Graham. Obviously, he wasn't very effective between the 20s last year for Seattle, but, neither was Jordy Nelson for the Packers, for that matter. He did most of his damage in the red zone. I don't think, you're going to replicate everything that Jordy did with Graham, but I think his production will be picked up there, very much so. Do you think we end up picking two times in the first round? I know Peter Bukowski had that in his mock draft today. I put it up in my mock draft roundup at PackersNews.com. Make sure you check that out. It's a possibility, especially if Gutekunst feels like he wants to kind of really overhaul and add ingest. What's ingest? Is that? I can't think of the word. Have an influx of talent on the defensive side of the ball. Some premier talent, so to speak. I think it's a possibility. They have the draft capital, right? I mean, there's 12 picks. I can't imagine they're going to execute all those picks. So yeah, I think the possibility is there. It really depends on, who ends up falling that they have a higher grade on, that they deem worthy of going to get. And then, really who's on the clock. Maybe the Panthers, as Peter suggested in his mock. There are teams down there, clearly, who probably would be amiable to dropping down. But there's a lot of factors at work there. Is it a possibility? Yes. Do I expect it to happen? No. Infuse or inject? Either one of those is good. I think infuse is the one I was searching for that I completely botched. You think Davante Adams can step up his game like Jordy? I think we saw the beginning of that last year, very much so. I think the sky's the limit for Davante Adams, especially with Aaron Rodgers throwing him the football. I don't know if he'll ever be quite the deep threat that Jordy was in 2014, but I don't think he needs to be. But I definitely think you saw last year his capabilities, even with even with Brett Hundley at quarterback. You go back and watch that Pittsburgh game, how he shakes deep. And that's a bad ball by Hundley, and he still breaks free for a touchdown with his yak. So, yeah, I definitely think you're going to see Adams become the bona fide number one guy next year, no question. Chubb still on the board. With Cleveland on the fourth pick, would the Packers be tempted to move up? Whew. I don't know. That would be awfully rich. I tend to think that'd probably be a little bit more than the Packers would be willing to give up, as far as if you're just looking at the trade chart and what they'd have to give up to get up to 4, jump 10 spots. Seems a lot. Now, maybe because John Dorsey, Elliott Wolf, Alonzo Highsmith, maybe because that group is there and there's some kind of relationship as far as what Gutekunst wants to do, what Cleveland wants to do, dropping down to 14, etc. They've clearly already shown that they're amiable to trading with the Kaiser and Randall swap. Maybe. But I really seriously doubt it. Any late round gems you like? Not yet, Austin. I'm actually starting my draft series for the paper. It'll be, I think, Friday's paper. I'm writing it right now. It's the first kind of introductory, laying the scene, so to speak, of the draft, and Gutekunst taking on his first draft. But I will be doing a piece on late round prospects in a few weeks. So be sure to watch for that, and I'll definitely talk about that in a week or so here on Facebook. Would you agree that Mike McCarthy playing 2 DBs out of position hurt the productivity? Well, now, let's be fair about this, right? Some of that is injury related, and a lot of that is the purview of the defensive staff. Now, obviously, Mike McCarthy has to sign off on it, but a big part of Dom Capers being the defensive coordinator in Green Bay was Mike McCarthy being able to be hands-off. Now, he certainly had input, and he certainly, like I said, had to sign off on everything and stamp his approval on it. But I think there are way too many factors at play here and way too many variables for us just to say, oh, they were playing out of position, it's a failure on everybody's part. Or it's definitely a failure, stamp it, it's a failure on Mike McCarthy's part. Now, the buck does stop with him, he's the head coach. But I think some of that was done out of necessity because of things that were on hand, and some of it was done out of necessity because of what the personnel group had handed them. They're dealing with talent or lack thereof at certain spots. They're dealing with injury, and they're having to shuffle and make it work on the fly. So, some of that definitely falls, McCarthy shares some of the blame there. There's no question about it. But I have a hard time putting that all on McCarthy's doorstep. Any news on Jeff Janis? Riley, funnily enough, my colleague Michael Cohn wrote a piece a couple hours ago. It posted on PackersNews.com. Make sure you check that out. What the Packers have to be weighing in regards to where they see his value as what would clearly be a special teams role. I think the longer he's out there, I think the better the chances that he returns to Green Bay. Andrew asked, do you see Rollins making any impact? I tell you what, I was a little bit surprised with McCarthy's glowing review of his recovery from the Achilles injury that he gave Michael and the guys yesterday. If he comes back healthy, I don't think he's ever going to be a top flight corner, but I do think he provides some good depth and could help them. He could be an asset on the defensive side of the ball, but I don't think he's anybody you can count on. He was struggling mightily even before the injury, and now he's got to deal with the comeback from that. And what you have to assume will be an influx of a draft pick or two. So I think he's going to have to fight to get on the roster, but it's a possibility. He could help. We'll see. We'll see what he looks like, because you never really know. The guy didn't have a ton of speed even before the injury. Now, coming back off a significant Achilles injury, we'll see. Let's see. Jeff Janis is coming back cheap or not at all. Ryan, I would agree with that. Any news on Jordan Matthews or Delvin Breaux? Nothing on either front. I haven't heard Matthews taking any other visits either, so I tend to think they may be weighing options. I haven't heard if the Packers actually offered a contract or not. As far as Delvin Breaux, still no word on a possible visit. I know Tom Silverstein is beating the drum and trying to find that out, but right now, no news on that. Somebody asked about Martavis Bryant earlier. I tell you what, I think he obviously would add something to the offense. There's no doubt about that, especially his the speed component that they've so noticeably lacked over the years. But I can't imagine the Packers giving up a draft pick, draft capital in general, to go get a guy who is a strike away from a year-long suspension. That's the risk you'd have to assume. And I don't see Gutekunst in a year where he has to remake the roster and kind of make it his own, so to speak. I don't see him taking that kind of chance. Dustin, does Martinez take another step this season? Man, that's a good question. I guess it depends on what you mean by another step. I don't think he can take much bigger step than he took last year, because he certainly grew in a way that I wasn't expecting, and I think it took a lot of people by surprise as far as his productivity. I think he has to, if he can just finish plays a little better, especially when it comes to turnover plays, then I think, then you could say, yes, he could take, that's to me, the step he needs to take. Because I don't think he's ever going to be Luke Kuechly. I don't think he's ever going to be a premier inside backer the way that some of the bigger names are. But I will say, if he can just start holding on to the football, because he's put himself in position for at least 3 or 4 interceptions last year, that if he just holds on, he changes those games. And that's a big part of being a playmaker, being a difference maker, is closing those plays, making those plays when they present themselves. Last year, he just couldn't do it. And I know everyone talks about the tackle totals, and those are great. And it is unfortunate that some of them do happen 5-6 yards beyond the line of scrimmage. Obviously, he can get turned around in coverage every once in a while, but he also, as I just said, does put himself in position to make plays. He had Cam Newton dead to rights. He had a couple other guys, just ball in his hands. He just dropped it. If he can just finish those, that's a step that I think he can take, and it will certainly help the Packers, and it will certainly help him in a bid to get a second contract. Is Odell Beckham Jr. thinking about going to Green Bay? I seriously doubt it. With the rules now, are kick returners a big necessity? I wouldn't think kick returners, but punt returners remain a valuable asset to have. Is it worth it buying a house across from Lambeau? I would say yes. I mean, having not purchased one myself, I know someone who has a house across from Lambeau, and they love it. So I'll go with yes. Is Pat Lee available to play corner? I love it. Why do Nagler haters comment? Because that's all they have in their pathetic little life, sitting on Facebook. They see I'm live, and they go, ooh, I'm going to, type in some hate. Man, if that's all you got, you do you, man. I'm sorry, those are the limits of your life. The Rams' schedule is brutal. It is indeed, Christopher. I'm interested to see the NFC West this year, I'll tell you that. Why is it so hard for us to sign a corner? I don't know. I wouldn't call it hard. I think they've been cautious. They didn't want to throw crazy money around in that first wave of free agency, and then tons of corners went off the board, and they signed Tramon Williams, who I think it will be an asset. Obviously, they tried to make the play for Fuller. I don't think they ever seriously thought they would get him at the price point that they put together. But I just think they haven't wanted to overpay at that position. Trade for Mateus. They make all sorts of cash on Sunday for parking. That's true, they do. Do you think Johnny Manziel will get another job in the NFL? Feels like it, right? It really does feel like it. I don't know, man. I'm 50-50 on that one. We'll see. Why aren't we focused on protecting Rodgers? Well, Lewis, let's wait for the draft, shall we? We'll see. Remember, this is Gutekunst's first year putting together a roster. Let's see what his ideas are as far as protecting Rodgers and acquiring assets to do so. There are still trades that can be made. There are still 12 draft picks to be selected. So I think it's a little early for a referendum on why aren't we protecting Rodgers. Any news on the cornerback Bro? Ron, I referenced that earlier. Nothing. There's been absolutely no word on his visit in Green Bay or anywhere else for that matter. Cambridge Analytica doesn't know if any of us like or hate the Packers. That is my favorite comment ever on Facebook. That's phenomenal. Why are you dressed like you're in some third world militia? That's what I threw on, man. That's how I dress. How come we never retired number 80? Probably because they shouldn't. Who are you retiring it for? That's what I think we went through this before. I know everyone will say Donald Driver, but how come you're not retiring it for James Lofton? He was a better receiver. He doesn't have the better numbers, but he was the better receiver. Yeah, keep 80 open. Because if he retired 80, you know, Justin Perillo wouldn't have gotten to wear it. Justin Perillo was done wrong, man. What could we ask for Hundley? For him to improve? Oh, you mean in trade? Let's go with a conditional 7th round pick in 2019. Alex Kappa. I missed the question because it went by too fast, but I tell you what, whoever said Alex Kappa, you are on the right track. You want to talk about protecting Rodgers? That kid, he could be an asset. He's somebody who I think will get selected on day 2, and I think the Packers will be in on that. I'm not saying they'll select him, but I think they'll definitely be looking, if he's available when they're selecting. I think they'll be in the conversation on that one. James Lofton had serious off-field issues. Breaking news. Pack really interested in C.J. Anderson. Hey, Nate, you know what? I got to be honest. This chat is the first I've heard of the C.J. Anderson stuff. I'm assuming something is out there on the internet that everyone is buzzing about. I'll check. I don't think so. A used washing machine for Hundley. I like it. You guys are great. The Packers will miss playoffs in 2018 if Hundley keeps chewing gum. Now there you go. I can't get better than that comment, so I'm going to wrap it up. Thanks a lot, guys. I'm sorry if I couldn't get to your question. Keep them coming, though. I'll be back tomorrow. Unless some C.J. Anderson news breaks tonight, I'll be back. Otherwise, make sure you're checking PackersNews.com for all the latest. There's tons of stuff there. Great stuff from the owners' meetings from both Pete Doherty and Michael Cohen. Check it out. Till tomorrow. Guys, have a good night.